Hi all, haven't posted in a while because nothing has really happened lately until a few minutes ago. So, my husband is on vacation and we are sitting on the couch. I'm watching him play Dead Island 2 and there's a knock on our door. When he's home, as the man of the house, he always answers the door. It's just a protective thing he does. He says if it's robbers, he can try to fight them off while I get away. Such a protector, my husband. Anyway, he looks at the people, no one is there. I kind of figure it's some kids playing Ding Dong Ditch or something, so we ignore it and go back to the video game. About 2 minutes or so later, there's this major banging on the door. I mean, like, major banging. Like someone took a sledgehammer and whacked the door 3 times. It startled the hell out of us, so my husband grabs his gun and walks cautiously to the door. Looks at the people, again, nothing. So he decides to stand there and see if it happens again. A few minutes later, that loud banging starts again, 3 times. This time, my husband yanks the door open, determined to catch the person doing it, and nothing. Now there is no way a person can bang on the door and get away before my husband opened the door because he was standing right at the door. No living person moves that fast. Not even Usain Bolt is that fast. Since we don't see anything, we both realize that it was something supernatural at play here. My husband closes the door, deadbolts it, and we return back to the couch. After 5 minutes of trying to wrap our heads around what just happened, our rocking chair starts rocking in a slow, steady motion on its own. No windows open at all. It's the middle of March, so it's still too chilly for open windows. I grab my rosaries off the fireplace, and my husband and I immediately start reciting Hail Marys. The rocking chair stops and slides halfway across the floor on its own. We hear bangs and bumps. It sounds like things being thrown about in our house, and then we hear heavy footsteps running toward our door. Mind you, I said my husband deadbolted the door. Suddenly, the deadbolted door swings open, very violently. We have a heavy and thick wooden door, so it's not easy to fling that thing open as easily as we just witnessed. As quick as the door swung open, it closed the same way. The house was back calm and peaceful, just like that. My parents taught me how to get rid of these things. When I was about 17, something tried to possess me. And when it didn't succeed, it didn't stop trying. Even now and then, it tries. But because I know what to do, and I have a wonderful and supportive husband that believes in me and helps me, it is too weak. I always suspect when I hear noises in threes that it's this thing, still trying to let me know that it's near. It usually doesn't become a nuisance when my husband is home, almost as if it's afraid of my husband. I usually have the most trouble out of it when I'm alone. If only I knew how to get rid of it for good. Okay, so this may seem strange, but for some reason, I've been reading a lot in Reddit No Sleep and Reddit Paranormal, and I feel comfortable sharing my experiences here. A lot of people think that I have some psychic abilities and therefore I keep encountering many things. But part of me feels it could be a mental illness, sleep paralysis, or something scientific that can be explained. Anyways, I'm going to tell my story, but here is a short something about me. Last time I saw my psychotherapist, I have depression and anxiety, so I see someone for it. I wanted to cover schizophrenia, so I told her that I do see things, hear things that aren't really there. I know that they aren't real. She stopped typing immediately and looked at me. Tell me more. What have you seen? So I began with the Phillips 66 gas station my uncle used to own before I was 10. The most interesting thing about this gas station was that there was a home in the roof of the gas station. The family lived upstairs. On weekends, I would visit my cousins often since my mom would help them out on Saturdays. I would always play in the gas station in the cold freezer. I would also play up in the roof of the building where they had their house. The thing was, this place didn't seem creepy to me, but it was strange at the same time. I would always hear voices in the floor vents, and once I even put my ear to the vent while I was wearing my cross necklace, and I felt a tug, and the cross pendant broke off and landed in the vent. My cousins had to unscrew the vents, and I crawled under and got the pendant. I heard snickering and giggling, and I got out of the vent and asked my cousins why they were laughing. They both looked at each other and said they weren't. The thing was, I slowly just kind of creeped out about the place. Every weekend we went, it was one thing after another of just strange. One week, I saw an apparition of my cousin who lives in LA walk out of my other cousin's room. Like, no lie, he looked like my cousin in LA. I stared at the figure as it glided across the living room, not blinking. It completely ignored me and didn't make any eye contact. My cousin broke my concentration and asked me what I was looking at. I just didn't know. This wasn't the first time I was seeing people that didn't live in town in that house. I heard a baby crying, and I knew my aunt just had a baby from LA. So I ran into the house and looked around. My mom asked me what was startling me. I told her I heard a baby crying, and she said it was just my imagination. That place drove me crazy. I would constantly hear voices and giggling, and it was always coming from that vent. I kept asking my cousins if they could hear the people downstairs through the vent, and they said no. Unfortunately for me, I started to spend the night there. Down there. I kept myself wrapped in blankets at night and refused to move in the dark. My cousins felt that was really strange. They had an old piano that was pretty off-key, and in the middle of the night, I heard it being played. I looked to my left and saw my cousin who played the piano fast asleep. I wasn't sure what was happening. So I inched forward to the door of her room and peeked underneath the door. There it was, my cousin from LA sitting there playing the piano. I wasn't sure what was going on. My cousin is alive. This thing looks like a ghost. Why does it look like my cousin? Suddenly, the thing stopped and I held my breath. It started to walk towards the bedroom and I gasped and jumped back into the bed, disturbing my sleeping cousin. What is it? I keep seeing Dennis. Dennis is in LA. You've been acting strange lately. Get some sleep. I'll make you brownies tomorrow. The last month my cousins lived there, I was left upstairs by myself as my mom and uncle were downstairs. If I needed anything, they told me to just call the store number. There were boxes everywhere, and I was watching cartoons as kept picking at the skin on the bottom of my toe. I wasn't thinking much as I was just coloring. A couple hours later, my cousins came in with pizza. I looked up and smiled at them, and one rushed to me and picked up my hands. What did you do? I looked at her confused. I'm just coloring. No, what did you do? I looked down and there was blood all over my hands. I had ripped all my cuticles till they were bloody and my nails looked chewed so close to the skin they were all bleeding. I also tore and ripped up the underside of both of my big toes, and I ripped so much skin off and some of the flesh was still dangling. I suddenly started to feel pain and began to freak out. I didn't know to cry or what. Her brother rushed to the bathroom and brought a first aid kit. They cleaned me up and disinfected as I sat quietly confused. I looked up while getting band-aids put on and saw my cousin Dennis in the corner just laughing. My mom was quite upset with me, and I was no longer left alone in that place. I was back downstairs with her every weekend and playing with boxes and drawing on them, watching cartoons. Seems like you were just hallucinating from stress, my therapist said calmly. She told me it could have been depression or stress that caused me to hallucinate. I fidgeted with my water bottle. Do you see similar things still? No, I lied. I don't know why I lied. Maybe because I know I'm not crazy when it comes to seeing things. Yet, I have no idea why I saw an apparition that looked just like someone I knew. It bothers me still. Anyone have any ideas? I'm pretty skeptical about paranormal stuff. I love to read about it, but I'm not sure if I believe in it. Seeing is believing, I guess, though after reading some stories, I really don't want that rule to be true. Still, there are some unexplainable events that stand out to me. The first one was something that happened to me when I was younger. I was about 4, 5, or 6, around that age. I had 3 sisters. I was the only boy at home. All 3 of my sisters had their own room, fully decorated, while I was staying on a mattress in a new room. I believe we just switched rooms and I didn't have a bed yet. This was in the middle of the night. I woke up and heard the strangest giggling. And no, this wasn't a malfunctioning toy. We didn't even have a toy that sounded like this. I can clearly remember hearing this creepy laughing, yet not seeing its origin. I ran to my parents' room, which wasn't that far. Of course, they didn't believe me, or didn't even bother to listen to me because I just woke them from their sleep. I would say this might just have been easily explainable, except that this wasn't the only time this occurred. In fact, it occurred again the next day. Not at night, but at daytime. And not in my room, but in the living room. Clear as day, I heard that same laugh. No one else heard it. It sounded like it came from the cabinet that was standing next to the door. But when I opened it to find the origin of the sound, there was nothing. Now, I'm not the only one to have experienced weird stuff in this house. Though, as far as I know, I'm the only one who has actually directly heard something unexplainable. One of my sisters told me about how they felt like something tried to grab them every time they left the house. Second experience was pretty strange as well. This was in a different house some years later. I was sleeping in the same room as one of my sisters in a bunk bed. I was on top. This was also at night. I'm not sure if this was a dream, which is strange because I never doubt whether I dreamt something or not. Dreams feel different than reality, even in memory, as this felt oddly real. What happened was that I woke up late at night. It was dark in my house. I opened my eyes and saw a figure I didn't recognize. It looked off. It was wrinkly, dark, and bald. It looked human, though I don't know who it could have been. It didn't do anything else than look at me. I hid under my blanket, and when I peeked out, it was still there, just staring at me. It had a pretty friendly look on its face. It even had a smile on its face. And I don't remember it as something incredibly scary. I just remember it as a pretty weird thing. Third one was something that truly terrified me. This was a few years later. I was 9 or 10 years old and home alone. Or so I thought. I can clearly remember hearing something whispering my name, like whatever whispered my name wanted me to come closer. Of course, I did what anyone would do when you're home alone and hear something creepily whispering your name. I fled the house. This led to a pretty creepy conversation with my teacher the next day in class. I told this story, and she basically filled the entire afternoon with us talking about ghost occurrences. It creeped me out when she talked about some folktale from Suriname, where she was from, about ghosts luring you and when no one is around and then killing you. Yeah, I was pretty creeped out then. That was not a fun thing to hear as a 9/10-year-old. The fourth one occurred to me when I was sleeping in a castle a few years ago. I did a lot of medieval reenactment, and because of that, we spent a weekend with our entire group in a castle. Not a big castle, but this cute little thing. It used to be bigger, but a lot of it was destroyed in multiple fires, which is the smallest castle in the Netherlands. It's also supposedly haunted, though, as the Dutch ghost hunter called it, they were friendly and harmless ghosts. My father, my little sister, and me slept in a room that used to belong to the owner of the castle before he had moved out of it and live in a house next to the castle. This room was filled with some pretty old objects: swords, pistols, pictures, and even a big old Bible. In the middle of the night, the ground shook as if an earthquake was happening. Trouble is, only me and my dad seemed to notice it. No one else in the group of 20 plus people who were all sleeping in the downstairs area noticed it. Also, there are no earthquakes in this part. I do remember going to the attic of that same castle's, which did make me feel rather uneasy. A feeling as if something was watching me from further down the attic. Some other members of the reenactment group who were sleeping next to the stairs to the attic claimed to have heard someone running up the stairs and shutting the door to the attic very loudly late at night. The fifth one happened 1.5 years ago when I was 17 years old. I was at the house of a friend of my dad. She lives in this pretty old farmhouse in a small village. My dad basically claims that this house is haunted. He's had some pretty weird experiences himself and flat out believes in it. He has stayed at a few supposedly haunted castles and claims that he heard screams come from the dungeons at a castle which was known for its torture. He told me that he had a few experiences about how the dog barks at basically nothing in the garden, about how he once saw someone flash by him when he was unloading his car after a weekend of reenactment, about how he always has a weird feeling when he's in the garden. One night when we were loading the car, I was standing in the kitchen, which looks straight out into the garden. This could have been my eyes tricking me, but it was very strange, and seeing it made me feel weird even though I was a few meters away from it. The best I can describe it is like this. It looked like someone drew the outlining of a person with lightning bolts. I know that might sound like a weird description, but that's what it looked like. Not a fully detailed person, but an outlining. And it was there for 1 second before it disappeared again. I felt a strange, energetic feeling all through my body when I saw it. It's a combination of seeing and feeling that made me doubt about this being easily explainable. Those were the experiences I've had. I thought it would be fun to share these stories with you. As I said, I'm still a skeptic, even though I have no explanations for these occurrences. I am very interested in the paranormal, but I don't know for sure if I believe in it. I have to agree that some stuff happens that we can't explain, and am very open to clear proof when it's presented to me. This takes place at my boyfriend's house. I stay over at my boyfriend's house on weekends. I have done for years now. We used to stay up late all the time, and when his parents went to bed, we stayed downstairs so we wouldn't wake them with the TV or our voices. We could also hang out with this dog and cat then, which I loved. We don't stay up like this as often anymore, but over a year ago, it was a regular thing. One of those times, we were up and it was around 2 a.m. We were sitting on the biggest sofa, which is directly against a wall separating their house and their neighbor on that side. While we were watching something on telly, we began hearing knocking on that wall behind us. It was a steady knocking, constant and even, like someone was hammering without a break, which is odd at 2 a.m. Our first thought was that the neighbors were getting freaky, but we didn't hear any voices, moans, and it didn't relent after a fair amount of time. Our minds also went to the fact that the neighbor was decorating at that time, but they'd recently plastered that wall, and we doubted even at 2 a.m. they'd want to hammer on it. It carried on, going for well over an hour, and during that hour, I began talking just for the sake of it. We were spooked into silence until I broke it, but whenever we'd speak, the strangest thing would happen. The knocking would increase in speed and volume, and it became eerily like someone was trying to keep our attention. I didn't like that at all. This became a common occurrence. Whenever I'd stay over there, we'd hear it at the same time, and it would happen the same way. Even when I didn't stay, my boyfriend would hear it and message/Skype me about it. We couldn't find an explanation at all. Eventually, we were sitting in my boyfriend's living room one evening with his dad. Sometimes his dad will bring up the topic of the house and the strange things that happen, and I love those times. I love listening to his experiences. This time, we hesitantly told him about the banging on the wall, and neither of us were quite prepared for how he'd respond. He looked at us and casually said, "Oh, that? I've been hearing it for years. No idea what it is." I got chills. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I knew right then that it couldn't possibly be the neighbors. It couldn't be decorating. It had to be something else. There's a huge part of me that wants a rational explanation. But as of now, it's still a mystery to us, and we haven't heard it in a long time. We have no idea if his dad still hears it or not. Maybe we should ask him.